Are you ready to hear a story that will give you goosebumps? If you are, hit that like button to boost your courage, share to warn your friends, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any chilling tales from us. Now then, let the story begin.
Hospitals always smell like someone tried to erase what happened there. Bleach and lemon and something under it that never goes away. I'm sitting in a plastic chair that makes a soft crunch every time I shift my weight, like it's chewing on my nerves. The waiting room TV plays a cooking show with the sound off. A woman is smiling while whisking eggs into a sunny cloud. Across the hall, my parents breathe, if you can call it that, because a machine tells them to. The monitor draws green mountains on a black horizon. Up, down, life doing the bare minimum. A resident doctor came by earlier. He wore the same expression everyone wears when they don't know the answer but want you to respect them anyway. He said, "We're running more tests." He said, "The EEGs are atypical." He said, "We've never seen quite this presentation." He said a lot of things that meant, "We are lost in here." I could lie to him and tell him I'm lost too. It would be an easier story to carry. But I'm not lost. I'm pinned like a butterfly to a piece of cork by a memory that won't stop twitching. A week ago, I finished my last exam and fell face first into the kind of sleep you don't choose. I was a body pulled to the bottom of a lake. No dreams, no surface. I woke up 24 hours later with a headache behind my eyeballs, the kind that makes you feel like there's a second skull growing inside your first one. Sunlight pooled on my carpet in warm rectangles. The house was quiet in a way that promised coffee and toast and my mother humming off-key. I padded downstairs in socks. That morning held the casual confidence of ordinary things. The squeak of the railing, the creak at the fourth step, the stainless steel refrigerator door that always magneted shut on your sleeve. I was rehearsing how to ask my dad, again, about letting me take the car on the highway when I turned the corner into the kitchen. Memory is supposed to be unreliable. Mine is not. It is a photograph I can crawl into. The first lie happened right there. My mother's face performed joy like it was a poem she learned in school. Too many teeth. Eyes sparkling the way glass sparkles right before you realize it's a bottle shattered on the floor. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she sang, the voice she used when I was 5 and she wanted me to try broccoli. My father stood beside her with his hands folded like he was about to give a speech. "We have news," he said, and his voice was a little too careful, as if he had filed the edges off each word. Behind them, a bowl of cereal sat on the table, soggy loops blooming into the milk like tiny drowned halos. The chair at the table, the chair I always sit in, back to the window, view of the hallway so no one can sneak up on me, was pulled out. There was a jacket draped over it. It wasn't mine. It was dark and long and looked like it would smell like rain even on dry days. Before I could ask the obvious questions, whose jacket is that? Why do you both look like game show contestants? My father said, "A relative came to stay." He glanced at my mother. She nodded, too fast, like a bobblehead. "From my side," he added, as if that detail made it make sense. "We don't have relatives who just show up. My father's family is a border and an ocean away. My mother has always been a pocket with nothing inside. Our unit, his word, was small by design. Dad, Mom, me, and the house that never had to learn a new name. The confidence of our life came from how little there was to explain. I looked at the jacket again. A single long hair clung to the collar. It wasn't my mother's brown or my father's salt and pepper or my own too long buzz cut. It was black, glossy, like something that had been underwater and come up shining. "Where is he?" I asked. "He's resting," my mother said too quickly. "In the spare room," my father added. "We cleared it. He was very tired." The spare room hadn't been a room in years. It had been boxes and photo albums and a broken stationary bike that pinched your calf if you got too close. You don't clear it in a morning, and you don't clear it without me hearing the decade of junk arguing on its way down the stairs. Unless you started before I woke up, unless you started days ago. I must have looked like an open mouth because my mother crossed the room and put a hand on my cheek. Her palm was cold, like the fruit drawers in the fridge. "You look so thin," she said, which is the kind of thing mothers say when they want to change the subject without admitting they're changing the subject. "Eat first, questions later." A spoon lay in the cereal bowl at the place setting that wasn't mine. The spoon handle pointed toward the chair like an arrow that knew where it belonged. There was a second bowl next to it, dry, waiting. "We'll all eat together when he wakes," my father said, eyes sliding to the hallway. The house seemed to lean with him, as if it too was listening for footfalls. I said, "What's his name?" My father's expression shut like a cabinet. "You'll meet him soon." "Soon when?" I asked. I meant it like a joke, a little teenage pushback to reclaim gravity. My voice came out too sharp. It cut the room. I saw my mother flinch. "Don't be rude," she said. And there was something behind the words that I recognized from childhood, the firmness of a rule, but also something new and brittle, like ice trying to hold a boot print. I looked past them at the hallway. The spare room door was closed. A slice of shadow pooled under it. That part won't sound like anything to you, I know. Doors have shadows all the time, but this was thick the way syrup is thick. It reached across the hall to the linen closet like a hand trying to make a second hand. The TV in the waiting room flickers. The chef on the screen pulls a pan from the oven, steam rising like applause. Back here on the plastic chair, my phone buzzes with a text from a number I don't know. "We need you to confirm your billing address." The world keeps insisting it still exists. If you're wondering why I didn't run then, it's because life almost always presents the worst thing as if it were a small thing first. A jacket on a chair, a lie that fits inside a breakfast, a door that makes too much shadow. You tell yourself not to be dramatic. You tell yourself you don't want to embarrass your parents or yourself or the ghost of the normal life that hasn't realized it's dead yet. So I didn't run. I went upstairs to brush my teeth and splash water on my face and stare into the mirror until the person in it looked like someone who could handle a surprise guest. I thought about the highway and the car and the first summer break that wasn't just a long list of chores. When I came back down, the cereal had gone to mush. The jacket had not moved. The door down the hall stayed shut, and the shadow stayed exactly the same size, as if it had learned how to breathe without changing shape. "Soon," my father said again, smiling a tight, professional smile that never touched his eyes. Here's the part I remember more clearly than anything else. The way the air changed right then. Not colder, not warmer, just flatter. Like a room loses sound after someone slams a book closed. Somewhere upstairs, something tapped once. Not on the floorboards, beneath them. A knuckle on a hollow place. "Ah," my mother whispered, the way people whisper in church when they see the person they came to see. And that was the first time I realized the house wasn't ours anymore. It was being rented out by something I didn't understand. It took me one more hour to see him. One more hour to learn which part of me would break first. He didn't arrive so much as manifest, like the house had been practicing a magic trick and finally got it right. One moment there was only the long hallway and that shut spare room door. The next, he was sitting at our kitchen table as if he'd been there all morning, elbows close to his ribs, hands folded like he'd been taught not to touch anything he couldn't name. He looked younger than my parents, but older than me, 30 maybe. His hair was long and black in a way shampoo commercials are never honest about. A wet-looking curtain that made you wonder if it knew how to dry. His skin was the color of the inside of a wrist. The worst thing was his eyes. They were a precise wrong yellow, the edge of a bruise, the paper of a warning sign faded by years of sun. Not gold, not amber. Yellow, like something grown under a bed. My mother exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath for a week. "There you are," she said, and it came out like thank God dressed up as good morning. My father put a hand on my shoulder. His fingers were too tight, a clamp instead of comfort. "Don't crowd him," he said softly. He's tired." The jacket I'd seen earlier now hung on the chair properly, weighted by a body that didn't seem to weigh much at all. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He looked at the bowl my mother had set in front of him. Milk clouded over with the starch of cereal, and then did something that made my back teeth ache. He lifted the spoon with slow care, brought it to his lips and paused. Not long, a heartbeat too long. Just enough for the room to learn his rhythm. Then he ate. We watched. I waited for introductions. Names are how you hang strangers on a hook so they don't slide around in your mind. My parents didn't offer one. They moved around the kitchen with their bodies aimed toward him the way sunflowers try to aim themselves at dawn. Plates, napkins, habit. My mother laughed at nothing twice. My father made a joke about the toaster that sounded like a recording of my father making a joke about the toaster.
I said too brightly.
Hi! And felt 12 years old on the first day of school. He didn't blink. His eyelashes were long enough to cast a thin comb of shadow on his cheeks. The spoon went up. It came down. Milk ringed the bowl like frost on a window. He ate until the cereal turned to beige paste and kept eating. We were a family of 4 people and 1 bowl. My stomach was loud enough to cosplay a door knock. I reached for the bread. My mother's hand snapped out and gently, so gently, pushed mine back. "Wait," she said, and her smile had 24 teeth in it, but no person. "Until he's finished," my father said, apologetic but immovable. "It's respectful." Respectful of what? I almost asked. Of a relative? Of a guest? Of a man with eyes that looked like you'd feel sick if you named their exact color out loud. But I was still clocking the small changes. I was still giving the morning a chance to correct itself. So I folded my hands and sat, suddenly aware of the squeak the chair made under me, the way sound seemed to slip off him and land on me instead. He ate. The house synchronized to the wet click of that spoon on his teeth. When he set the spoon down, he didn't place it in the bowl. He rested it on the tablecloth, perfectly parallel to the edge, like he was aligning a ruler. My mother flinched as if she'd expected a different ending. My father made a little collecting motion with his fingers, as if to gather up whatever stray thing had just been released, and then nodded to me. "Go ahead." I buttered toast I didn't want, and chewed until it turned into saltless gum. Every swallow had to pass through the feeling that I was being rude by existing. No one told him where the bathroom was, but he stood and walked to it without looking. That was the first time I heard how he moved. Not silent. Silence is a kind of sound, but sound wrong. Footsteps without heel or toe, a glide that made my skin do the opposite of goosebumps. He turned the corner and the house exhaled, relieved to be out from under a cloud. My mother grabbed my hands across the table. Her fingers were damp and shaking. "Don't look at him too long," she whispered, as if the sentence might cut if she said it at a normal volume. "What?" "Just don't," she squeezed. "Please, sweetie." My father's jaw worked like he was quietly chewing a thought into something that wouldn't choke him. "When you need to say something," he said, eyes on the hallway, "tell us. We'll pass it along." "To who?" I asked, and heard it. The crack in my voice, the thin sound of a boy practicing man. "He's right there." "Don't be rude," my mother said again. But it wasn't a scold this time. It was a prayer. "Please don't make me pick between you and the thing I've already chosen." He came back from the bathroom with his sleeves dry and his hands bone pale, as if he'd washed them in flour. He stood in the middle of the kitchen and turned his head slightly, like a bird deciding whether a window was sky. Then he moved down the hall toward the family photos. Birthdays, my braces, my dad with a stupid mustache one summer, my mom in a thrift store prom dress we made a cake for. He lifted his hand and held it near the frames without touching them, as if feeling for heat. The glass didn't fog with his breath. The pictures didn't rattle. He lowered his hand and went to the living room. He stopped in the center of the rug and stared at a blank section of wall like he was listening to a language that had been painted over. We shadowed him, not close enough to be accused of shadowing him. My father kept offering words like mince. He likes sunlight. He's a little jet-lagged. He prefers quiet. None of those sentences were answers to any question anyone had asked. At some point, 5 minutes, an hour, my mother remembered to go to work and then remembered she wasn't going, then remembered to call, then forgot the number, then dialed it perfectly with hands that shook. "We have a family situation," she said to whoever answered. "We'll be back on Monday." It was Tuesday. By late afternoon, I'd learned Rule 1. We wait until he's done. It applied to eating, to walking through doorways, to deciding whether the windows were open or closed. Rule 2 arrived when I tried to file past him to get to the stairs, and my father's fingers landed on my arm with that clamp again. We don't brush against him. Rule 3 showed up at dinner. We don't speak to him. We speak to my parents, who speak to the air in the part of the room where he is. And then they nod or flinch or laugh at the correct time, as if he has answered. I tested the perimeter of the rules the way you test an electric fence with a blade of grass. In the living room I said, quietly but clearly, "What do you want?" His head didn't move. My mother was in the doorway instantly. She didn't say don't. She said, "Apologize now." What? Why? Because you were rude, she said, and there were tears in her voice that made me sorry even as anger burned clean behind my eyes. Because you don't understand how to behave in your own home. Your own home. The words hit with a wrong echo, like yelling across a canyon that didn't used to be there. By bedtime, the spare room had been turned into something that made the air prickly. My parents had stuffed the garage with boxes that had lived upstairs since before I was born. The door to the room stayed closed, but I could feel the shape of it through the drywall. When they went inside with him, the house shifted its weight, ever so slightly, like someone taking off their shoes on a wooden floor. They stayed in there for hours. I heard the scrape of something on the floor, the soft sound of my mother crying and laughing in the same breath, a low murmur like a radio tuned exactly between stations. When they came out, their faces looked washed in a way water couldn't explain. My father kissed my forehead with a mouth that didn't remember how. "Things will be different for a while," he said gently, like he was telling me the dog had gone to live on a farm. "What things?" I asked. He glanced toward the spare room door. "You'll see." I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling while the house learned a new heartbeat. Somewhere below me, the refrigerator kicked on, then off, then waited. Pipes thunked and then went patient. The neighborhood went to sleep. Our windows reflected our dark back at us, except in the places where his wrong yellow eyes had been. Those spots held a dim, stubborn glow long after he left the room, the way light stays in your vision if you look at the sun. The man had not said a single word, and already I understood the most important part. He didn't need to. He wasn't visiting. He was borrowing, and everything in the house, including us, was collateral. The first thing you learn about rules made by someone who doesn't speak is that they don't come written down. They arrive in the air. They are discovered when you break them. By the third day, our house didn't feel like a home. It felt like a temple with one worshiper who didn't know he was worshiping, and two who did. Rule 1. Wait until he's done. We had already learned this one at breakfast, but dinner carved it into stone. My mother set his plate down first, steam curling from meat and vegetables. She hadn't cooked this way in years. She stood with her hands folded like a waitress waiting for a tip that never came. My father pushed my plate toward me, but his eyes warned, "Don't." So I didn't. We watched him eat, slow, deliberate. Knife and fork perfectly aligned, every bite chewed as if it carried instruction. My hunger turned acidic in my stomach, and the food on my plate went cold, little greasy halos forming around the potatoes. I glanced at my parents, waiting for a cue, any sign this was as insane as it felt. They didn't look hungry at all. They looked relieved. Only when he set his fork down, parallel to his knife, did my father clear his throat. "Go ahead." I shoveled food in like a prisoner. Each swallow scraped my throat. The rhythm was wrong, eating second in my own house, like drinking bathwater after someone else had soaked in it. Rule 2. Don't touch him. I didn't mean to test this one. It was morning, sunlight laying across the floor like a spilled blanket. He was standing in the hallway, perfectly still, staring at the thermostat. I needed to pass. I could have said, "Excuse me." Instead, I stepped wide, tried to slip by without breaking the orbit of his presence. My elbow brushed the sleeve of his long jacket. It was nothing, just a touch of fabric, but the sensation was wrong. His clothes didn't feel like cloth. They felt like paper pulled from the back of a freezer, brittle, damp with a cold that didn't melt. He didn't turn his head, didn't blink, didn't breathe differently. But the temperature in the hallway collapsed. My breath fogged. A pulse of nausea rolled up my stomach like I'd inhaled spoiled milk. My father appeared instantly, grip crushing my wrist. "Don't!" he hissed. His eyes flicked toward the man, terrified he might react. "Never touch him, ever!" The man didn't move, but the shadow beneath him, just for a second, lengthened across the floorboards, reaching toward me like a spill of ink. Then it shrank back, obedient, as if called home. Rule 3. Don't speak to him. By now, I should have known better than to push. But terror does strange things. It sharpens curiosity into a weapon you hold against yourself. That night, I found him alone in the living room. He was standing in the center of the rug, staring at the blank wall again, the one where nothing hung, where no picture had ever been. His hands were clasped behind his back like a soldier at ease. My throat was dry, but I forced the words out. "What do you want?" The sound dropped into the room like a rock into water. No ripples, just weight. He didn't move. Didn't even seem to register that I'd spoken. But my parents registered. They appeared in the doorway as if they had been waiting just outside, listening for me to fail. "Don't be rude," my mother snapped. Her eyes were wide, glassy, a panic I'd never seen in her voice before. "He is family. You speak to us, not to him." I laughed, bitter. "Family? He hasn't said a single word. He hasn't even looked at me." "Apologize," my father ordered. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "No!" my voice cracked. "This is insane! You don't even know him!" My father's palm struck the table so hard a spoon jumped. "Apologize!" The man never turned his head. He remained fixed on the wall, an audience of one for something invisible. My parents' eyes never left me. Their loyalty was no longer mine to claim. I whispered, "Sorry," because fear has a way of sanding down rebellion. Only then did the tension in the air ease. Only then did my father unclench his fists. The spare room. If the rules governed our days, the spare room governed our nights. They had gutted it of boxes and junk. What had been storage was now sanctuary. Every evening they carried trays of food inside, not for him, but for themselves. Then the door would shut, locked from the inside, and I would hear the scrape of furniture moved, the muffled cadence of voices not speaking any language I knew. I tried once, pressing my ear to the door. What came through wasn't words. It was rhythm, a frantic chant layered beneath whispers. My mother's voice, high and thin. My father's, low and broken. And underneath both, silence shaped like listening. I stepped back before they caught me. My heart wouldn't slow for hours. The house itself. By midweek, the house stopped belonging to us. Lights flickered when he entered a room. Not off, not on. Hesitant, as if unsure whether his presence deserved illumination. The refrigerator hummed only when he passed, then went quiet again. The water from the taps tasted faintly metallic, like blood in your mouth after biting your tongue. I tried sleeping with headphones, but the music seemed to bend around him, fading whenever his footsteps crossed the hallway. And his footsteps weren't footsteps anymore. They were something sliding, something gliding, something that didn't belong to shoes or floors. Every rule we obeyed, the house obeyed too. Every boundary he drew, the walls reinforced. That was when I realized something I couldn't put into words until later. He wasn't living in our house. He was teaching it how to belong to him. And we were his lesson plan. The sound of a lock sliding into place at night should not be louder than a heart beating. But in my house it was. Every evening after dinner, after he had eaten and after we had waited, my parents carried plates into the spare room. The door closed, the bolt drew across, and then the house began its second life. I lay in bed those nights with the sheets pulled to my chin, staring at the ceiling fan that never seemed to move fast enough to stir the air. I told myself I wouldn't listen, that if I pretended hard enough, the scrape of wood on wood downstairs wasn't furniture being rearranged for something older than furniture, that the whispers weren't my parents speaking in tongues, that the faint vibration under my floorboards wasn't a presence moving without moving. But ignoring is just listening with your hands over your ears. The sound always found me, the keyhole. By the fourth night, fear stopped being a wall and started being a corridor. I had to know. I waited until their footsteps receded into that room, until the murmur of their voices reached the pitch of worship instead of conversation. Then I crept. Each step up the stairs cracked like a bone. The spare room door was old oak, warped in the middle, the kind of door that held a brass keyhole wide enough to peek through if you bent just right. I knelt, pressing my eye to the cold ring. At first, all I saw was darkness. Then I realized it wasn't dark. It was candlelight, but so many candles that their glow fought itself, shadows crisscrossing like veins across the walls. Wax puddled on the floor in little rivers, hardening into pale arteries. And in the center of it all, him, the figure. He stood motionless, arms raised toward the ceiling as if gravity had forgotten him. His long fingers spread like roots searching for soil above. His face tilted back, chin sharp, throat pale. The candles bent toward him the way my parents bent toward him, as if heat itself wanted permission. He didn't sway. He didn't blink. He didn't even breathe. Or if he did, the air obeyed too quietly for me to see. My parents were on the floor, kneeling, backs bent until their foreheads pressed into the rug. Their hands trembled in front of them, palms up as if begging. They whispered a cadence I couldn't follow, something sharp and guttural, then smooth and pleading. Not words, not English, not any language my ears wanted to recognize. I pressed closer, desperate to catch a syllable, any clue. My eyes stung from the brass cutting into my socket, but I didn't dare move. Then I saw it. The air. The space around him wasn't empty, it shimmered. Not like heat on pavement. More like water just before it freezes. Thick, waiting, heavy with decision. The longer I stared, the less it seemed like a shimmer, and the more it seemed like shapes. Curves, patterns, outlines that weren't quite there but weren't not there either. One bent downward toward my parents. Their bodies shook harder as if the air itself had reached inside them. My mother's voice broke into a sob, but she kept chanting. My father pounded his fist once against the floor, not in anger, but in surrender. And still he didn't move. The man with yellow eyes, the man who had never spoken. He simply received. The smell. Something hit me then. A smell. Not through the door, not through wood and brass, but inside me, as if the memory of a smell had been dropped into my head. It was sweet. Rotting sweet. Like fruit left too long in the sun until it liquefies and draws flies. I gagged, clamped a hand over my mouth. The chanting rose, faster, frenzied. I stumbled back from the door. My shoulder hit the wall. For a moment, I thought I'd made a sound loud enough to betray me. The whispers faltered. Silence spilled into the hallway, heavy and listening. I held my breath until my chest screamed. Then the voices resumed. And the realization. I fled to my room, my knees jelly, my lungs tearing. I locked the door, though what good would that do? I pressed my back against it and shook. My brain tried to arrange the scene into something sane. My parents had joined a cult, the man was their leader, the chanting was rehearsed. Yes, insane but explainable. But that air that bent like it was alive, that smell that wasn't in the house but in me. This wasn't cult behavior, this wasn't religion. This was worship of something that didn't need to ask for it. Something that didn't need to move or speak, because the world around it did the kneeling for it. I should have run. Should have called someone right then. But fear has a way of convincing you tomorrow is safer than today. So I lay awake until morning, staring at my door, waiting for the knock that never came. The knock came the next night. Not at the spare room. At my door. Knock, knock. The first two knocks didn't sound like wood meeting knuckles. They sounded polite, patient, as if the air itself had learned how to mimic courtesy. Knock, knock. I froze in bed, pulse hammering in my throat. My door was locked, but I knew instinctively locks meant less than breathing when it came to him. A second pair of knocks, softer, almost gentle. I whispered to myself, don't move, don't breathe, don't answer. But fear is a traitor. Fear makes you curious. My body stood before my mind, gave it permission. My hand trembled as I turned the knob, and he was there, his smile. Up until then, he had never looked at me, not once. His eyes had been for cereal bowls, for blank walls, for the spare room lit with candles. Never me. Now they were locked on mine. Yellow, too bright, too wrong. They caught the hallway light but didn't reflect it. They consumed it, like staring into the bruise-colored glow of a gas flame. And his lips, thin, bloodless lips, peeled back into a grin. Not wide, too wide. A grin stretched beyond anatomy, white teeth bared in a shape that wasn't humor, wasn't welcome, wasn't anything human. It was the shape of triumph, of ownership. The smile said, I've been waiting for you to notice me, words I shouldn't have spoken. My fear cracked into anger, brittle and desperate. Who are you? I screamed, my voice hoarse. What have you done to them? My parents, my house, my life. I expected laughter. I expected rage. I expected anything but what I got. He didn't answer. He didn't blink. He simply stood there, smiling as if my rage was a hymn and he was the church it was sung in. I stumbled on, shouting, spitting words just to hear my own humanity. This is my house! Get out! The police are coming for you, do you hear me? They're coming! The grin didn't falter. It deepened. The retreat. Finally, slowly, gracefully, he turned. No rush, no fear, just a casual pivot, like a man deciding to take a walk after dinner. He moved down the stairs, his long hair spilling over his shoulders, his jacket brushing the walls without a sound. I followed. God help me, I followed, because some instincts are stronger than reason. My feet hit the wood loud and clumsy compared to his gliding silence. At the front door, he paused. He didn't look back at me. He didn't need to. The smile was still there, stretching his face in profile. He opened the door without touching the handle. Night spilled in, streetlights humming, shadows long across the quiet suburban street. He stepped out like the world was his living room, not mine. He didn't run. He didn't vanish. He just walked, slow and steady down the sidewalk. His tall, thin figure bent under the lamps, distorted by every shadow. He turned a corner. Gone. The house exhaled. I screamed for my parents. The collapse. I found them in the spare room. The candles had guttered into puddles of wax. The air was thick, oily, as if it had been breathed too many times. My parents were on the floor, sprawled in awkward positions like marionettes with cut strings. Their faces were gray, lips slack, but their chests rose and fell, shallow, strained. I shook them, begged them, slapped their cheeks. Nothing. Their eyes stayed closed. Their mouths whispered nothing. I called the police with fingers that could barely hit the numbers. My voice broke into the phone. "There's a man. He was here. My parents. They're not waking up. Please, please, send someone." They told me help was coming. I almost believed them. The third knock downstairs while I waited for sirens, the house shifted. The front door opened again. Knock, knock. Soft, polite. From the inside this time. I didn't move. Red and blue lights turned my street into a carousel. Neighbors cracked blinds, curious, but no one opened their doors. No one wanted to step into what was happening inside my house. I didn't blame them. 2 officers came in first, hands resting on holstered weapons, though their eyes already said it. This isn't the kind of call we're trained for. A third followed with a radio pressed to his mouth, murmuring codes that sounded too calm for the nightmare unfolding around me. The paramedics checked my parents. Vitals weak, but there. No signs of trauma. They lifted my mother onto a gurney first, then my father. Both lay limp, heads rolling side to side as if their necks had forgotten how to work. The whole time I kept repeating, "He was here? He was here? He walked out that door." My voice cracked like glass, but I said it anyway, again and again, as if saying it would pin him to reality. One officer, a younger guy with a square jaw, nodded like he wanted to humor me. "Okay, son, we'll check the cameras." Checked the footage. We had a simple security system. 2 cameras, front and back doors. Nothing fancy. The officer set his laptop on the table, pulling up the feed from just minutes before. "There," I said, stabbing my finger at the screen. "Right there, you'll see him. He walked out while I was right behind him." The footage rolled. I saw myself, wild-eyed, frantic, shouting at the doorframe. I saw myself jerk the knob, fling the door open, scream into the night. But I was alone. The doorway yawned empty. The porch light buzzed above me. The street stretched silent and untouched. The door swung wide, then shut again, as if by draft. No tall man, no black hair, no yellow eyes, just me, screaming at nothing. The gentle voice. The officer turned the laptop toward me, careful, as if the truth might cut me. "There's no one there, son." His voice was soft, rehearsed, the kind of voice they used on people who had already broken. "The cameras didn't pick anyone up all night. Just you." "I followed him." My throat hurt from shouting. "I saw him. He knocked on my door. He smiled at me. My parents. He did this to them. He drained them." The officer's eyes flicked toward his partner, some silent conversation passing between them. I hated that look, that doubt. The whisper in the kitchen. The older officer, the one with thinning hair, stepped into the kitchen to call someone on his phone. I barely noticed until his voice dropped, urgent, low. "Yeah, another one. Same as the others. Parents catatonic, kid hysterical, talking about a tall guy with yellow eyes. No, nothing on camera. Same pattern. It's the 5th one this year. 5th. My veins iced over. The word echoed in my head like a curse. 5th. He saw me looking at him, his mouth snapped shut. He left the room, pretending the call was about procedure, about transport, about paperwork. But I knew. The hospital. By dawn, my parents were wheeled into sterile corridors and hooked up to machines that breathed for them, beeped for them, lived for them. The doctors used words like unprecedented, unexplained, neurological collapse. But I knew what had happened. He had fed, not with teeth, not with hands, with presence, with silence, with rules we had obeyed until they owned us. And he had left, smiling, to find another house that would open the door and say, "Come in, you're family now." Chatters their worst hero. When the doctors finally let me sit beside my mother's bed, I took her hand. It was warm, but not alive in the way I remembered. I leaned close, whispered through tears, "I'm sorry. I should have done something sooner." And for the first time since the night began, I thought I saw her lips move. Just a flicker. Just enough to form a single silent word. Run. Hospitals at night are quieter than graveyards. At least graveyards don't hum with machines pretending they can outsmart death. I sat between my parents' beds, two bodies breathing because wires and tubes told them to. Their chests rose and fell in perfect rhythm, like someone else was conducting. Their eyes were closed, their mouths slack, their souls, if souls are real, locked away somewhere I couldn't reach. I should have felt safe with police reports filed, doctors bustling, security lights glowing. But safety is just ignorance with a good PR team. Once you've seen the thing with yellow eyes, you don't get safety back. Chant the fifth one. I kept hearing the officer's voice in my head. It's the fifth one this year. That meant I wasn't alone. Other kids had sat in rooms like this, explaining to officers who didn't believe them that a man with a grin too wide had walked out the front door. Other parents were lying in beds with blank faces and shallow breaths. Other homes had bent themselves to new rules, only to be abandoned like husks once the feeding was over. The thing wasn't haunting me. It was hunting neighborhoods like mine, family by family, house by house. The guilt. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The jacket draped over my chair, the cereal bowl at my place, the first smile that was too brittle to be real. I should have done something sooner, called sooner, left sooner, broken the rules sooner. My parents had treated him like a god, and I had been too paralyzed to pull them away from the altar. Now their lives were drained, and I was the only one left awake to feel it. The tape that lied. The police reviewed the footage again the next morning. Same result. Me alone, screaming at air. Me opening doors to nothing. Me losing my mind in high definition. One officer clapped me on the shoulder with professional sympathy. "Trauma can make us see things," he said. "You've been under a lot of stress." But his partner, the older one, wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew, he'd seen it before, and that silence was worse than disbelief. The dream. I must have dozed in the waiting room, head tipped against the wall. I dreamed of my house. Except it wasn't mine anymore. It was empty, gutted, stripped of furniture and photographs. Only the spare room remained lit, candles arranged in patient circles. And in the center, he stood, smiling. His arms raised, his fingers spread, the air shimmering with shapes that wanted names. I woke choking on the scent of rotting fruit. My palms were damp. My throat was raw from a scream I hadn't made. And in my lap sat a single strand of long black hair. The truth. No one will believe me. Not the doctors, not the police, not the neighbors. They'll tell each other my parents collapsed from stress, from hidden illness, from anything but what really happened. They'll shake their heads and lower their voices when I walk past. But I know. He's still out there. He's already choosing his next house, his next family to worship, his next children to watch helplessly through keyholes. And one day, when their parents are drained dry and their cameras show nothing but hysteria, they'll join me in the truth that doesn't save anyone. The man with yellow eyes doesn't need doors or names or explanations. He only needs a place at the table. And once he sits down, you'll never get your home back.